The man had a right to be touchy with that scar, but Rand did not see anything he could do now that would not make matters worse. He concentrated on the music and avoided looking at the fellow. The dancing and singing went on into the night. The maids finally did remember their duties. Rand was glad to wolf down some hot stew and bread. Everyone ate where they sat or stood. Rand joined in 3 more dances, and he managed his steps better when he found himself dancing with Nynaeve again, and with Moraine as well. This time they both complimented him on his dancing, which made him stammer. He danced with Egwene again, too. She stared at him, dark-eyed and always seeming on the point of speaking, but never saying a word. He was just as silent as she, but he was sure he did not scowl at her, no matter what Mat said when he returned to the bench. Toward midnight, Moraine left. Egwene, after one harried look from the Aes Sedai to Nynaeve, hurried after her. The Wisdom watched them with an unreadable expression, then deliberately joined in another dance before she left too, with a look as if she had gained a point on the Aes Sedai. Soon Tom was putting his flute into its case and arguing good-naturedly with those who wanted him to stay longer. Lan came by to gather up Rand and the others. "We have to make an early start," the warder said, leaning close to be heard over the noise. "And we will need all the rest we can get." "There's a fellow been staring at me," Mat said. "A man with a scar across his face. You don't think he could be one of the friends you warned us about?" "Like this?" Rand said, drawing a finger across his nose to the corner of his mouth. "He stared at me, too." He looked around the room. People were drifting away, and most of those still left clustered around Tom. "He's not here now." "I saw the man," Lan said. "According to Master Fitch, he's a spy for the White Cloaks. He's no worry to us." Maybe he was not, but Rand could see something was bothering the warder. Rand glanced at Mat, who had the stiff expression on his face that always meant he was hiding something. White Cloak spy. Would Bornhald want to get back at us that much? "We're leaving early," he said. "Really early?"
One second, everyone.
Maybe they could be gone before anything came of it. "At first light," the warder replied. As they left the common room, Mat singing snatches of song under his breath, and Farron stopping now and again to try out a new step he had learned, Tom joined them in high spirits. Lan's face was expressionless as they headed for the stairs.
Let's see if I can get
"What
this
is my
back
niece
like I
sleeping?"
had
He
it.
asked. "Master Fitch said we got the last rooms." "She has a bed," Tom said dryly. "In with Mistress Alice and the girl." Farron whistled between his teeth, and Mat muttered, "Blood and ashes. I wouldn't be in Egwene's shoes for all the gold in Camelot." Not for the first time, Rand wished Mat could think seriously about something for more than 2 minutes. Their own shoes were not very comfortable right then. "I'm going to get some milk," he said. Maybe it would help him sleep. Maybe I won't dream tonight. Lan looked at him sharply. "There's something wrong tonight. Don't wander far. And remember, we leave whether you are awake enough to sit in your saddle or have to be tied on." The warder started up the stairs. The others followed him. Their jaws. Rand stood in the hall alone. After having so many people around, it was lonely indeed. He hurried to the kitchen, where a scullery maid was still on duty. She poured a mug of milk from a big stone crock for him. As he came out of the kitchen, drinking, a shape in dull black started toward him down the length of the hall, raising pale hands to toss back the dark cowl that had hidden the face beneath. The cloak hung motionless as the figure moved, and the face, a man's face with pasty white, like a slug under a rock, and eyeless. From oily black hair to puffy cheeks was as smooth as an eggshell. Rand choked, spraying milk. "You are one of them, boy," the Fade said, a hoarse whisper like a file softly drawn across bone. Dropping the mug, Rand backed away. He wanted to run, but it was all he could do to make his feet take one halting step at a time. He could not break free of that eyeless face. His gaze was held in his stomach. He tried to shout for help, to scream. His throat was like stone. Every ragged breath. The Fade glided closer, in no hurry. Its strides had a sinuous, deadly grace, like a viper, the resemblance emphasized by the overlapping black plates of armor down its chest. Thin, bloodless lips curved in a cruel smile, made more mocking by the smooth, pale skin where eyes should have been. The voice made Bornholz seem warm and soft. Where are the others? I know they are here. Speak, boy, and I will let you live. Rand's back struck wood, a wall, or a door. He could not make himself look around to see which. Now that his feet had stopped, he could not make them start again. He shivered, watching the Myrddraal slither nearer. His shaking grew harder with every... He could not make them start again. He shivered, watching the Myrddraal slither nearer. His shaking grew harder with every... He could not make them start again. He shivered, slither.
Not sure what happened to the music. Give me 1 second, everyone. Not sure what happened to the music. Give me 1 second.
Low stride.
There we go.
Speak, I say, or... From above came a quick clatter of boots from the stairs up the hall, and the Myrddraal cut off, whirling. The cloak hung still. For an instant, the Fade's head tilted, as if that eyeless
They
gaze
can
could pierce
swear.
the wooden wall. A sword
Thanks for
appeared in
stopping
a
by.
dead white hand, blade as black as the cloak. The light in the hall seemed to grow dimmer in the presence of that blade. The pounding of boots grew louder, and the Fade spun back to Rand, an almost boneless movement. The black blade rose, narrow lips peeled back in a rictus snarl. Trembling, Rand knew he was going to die. Midnight steel flashed at his head and stopped. You belong to the great lord of the dark. The breathy grating of that voice sounded like fingernails scratched across a slate. You are his. Spinning in a black blur, the Fade darted down the hall away from Rand. The shadows at the end of the hall reached out and embraced it, and it was gone. Lan leaped down the last stairs, landing with a crash, sword in hand. Rand struggled to find his voice. Fade, he gasped. It was... Abruptly, he remembered his sword. With the Myrddraal facing him, he had never thought of it. He fumbled the heron-marked blade out now, not caring if it was too late. It ran that way. Lan nodded absently. He seemed to be listening to something else. Yes, it's going, fading. No time to pursue it now. We're leaving, Sheepherder. More boots stumbled down the stairs. Matt and Perrin and Tom hung about with blankets and saddlebags. Matt was still buckling his bedroll, with his bow awkward under his arm. Leaving, Rand said. Sheathing his sword, he took his things from Tom. Now? In the night? You want to wait for the half-man to come back, Sheepherder? The warder said impatiently. For half a dozen of them? It knows where we are now. I'll ride with you again, Tom told the warder. Great objections. Too many people remember that I arrived with you. I fear that before tomorrow this will be a bad place to be known as your friend. You can ride with us or ride to Shale Ghul, Gleeman. Lan's scabbard rattled from the force with which he rammed his sword home. A stableman came darting past them from the rear door, and then Moraine appeared with Master Fitch, and behind them Egwene, with her bundled shawl in her arms. And Nynaeve. Egwene looked frightened almost to tears, but the Wisdom's face was a mask of cool anger. You must take this seriously, Moraine was telling the innkeeper. You will certainly have trouble here by morning. Dark friends, perhaps worse. When it comes, quickly make it clear that we are gone. Offer no resistance. Just let whoever it is know that we left in the night, and they should bother you no further. It is us they are after. Never you worry about trouble, Master Fitch replied jovially. Never a bit. If any come around my inn trying to make trouble for my guests, well, we'll get short shrift from the lads and I. Short shrift. And they'll hear not a word about where you've gone or when, or even if you're ever here. I've no use for that kind. Not a word will be spoken about you by any here. Not a word. But, Mistress Alice, I really must see to your horses if you're going to leave in good order. He pulled loose from her grip on his sleeve and trotted in the direction of the stables. Moraine sighed vexedly. Stubborn man. He will not listen. You think Trollocs might come here hunting for us? Matt asked. Trollocs? Moraine snapped. Of course not. There are other things to fear, not the least of which is how we were found. Ignoring Matt's bristle, she went right on. The Fade cannot believe we will remain here, now that we know it has found us. But Master Fitch takes Dark Friends too lightly. He thinks of them as wretches hiding in the shadows. But Dark Friends can be found in the shops and streets of every city, and in the highest councils too. Pedro may send them to see their plans. She turned on her heel and left, Lan close behind her. As they started for the stable yard, Rand fell in beside Nynaeve. Saddlebags and blankets too. So you're coming after all, he said. He was right. Was there something down here? She asked quietly. She said it was... She stopped abruptly and looked at him. A Fade, he answered. He was amazed that he could say it so calmly. It was in the hall with me, and then Lan came. Nynaeve shrugged her cloak against the wind as they left the inn. Perhaps there is something after you, but I came to see you safely back to Emond's Field, all of you, and I will not leave till that is done. I won't leave you alone with her sort. Like where the ostlers were saddling the horses. Much, the innkeeper shouted from the stable door where he stood with Moraine. Stir your bones. He turned back to her, appearing to attempt to soothe her rather than really listening when she spoke. Though he did it deferentially, with bows interspersed among the orders called to the stablemen. The horses were let out, the stableman grumbling softly about the hurry and the lateness. Rand held Egwene's bundle, handing it up to her when she was on Bella's back. She looked back at him with wide, fear-filled eyes. At least she doesn't think it's an adventure anymore. He was ashamed as soon as he thought it. She was in danger because of him and the others. Even riding back to Emond's Field alone would be safer than going on. Egwene, The words died in his mouth. She was too stubborn to just turn back. Not after saying she was going all the way to Tar Valon. What about what Min saw? She's part of it. Right, part of what? Egwene, he said. I'm sorry. I can't seem to think straight anymore. She leaned down to grip his hand hard. In the light from the stable, he could see her face clearly. She did not look as frightened as she had. Once they were all mounted, Master Fitch insisted on leading them to the gates, the stablemen lighting the way with their lamps. The round-bellied innkeeper bowed them on their way with assurances that he would keep their secrets, and invitations to come again. Much watched them leave as sourly as he had watched them arrive. There was one, Rand thought, who would not give short shrift to anyone, or any kind of shrift. Much would tell the first person who left him when they had gone, and everything else he could think of concerning them. A little distance down the street, he looked back. One figure stood, lamp raised high, peering after them. He did not need to see the face to know it was much. The streets of Faerlon were abandoned at that hour of night. Only a few faint glimmers here and there escaped tightly closed shutters, and the light of the moon in its last quarter waxed and waned with the wind-driven clouds. Now and again, a dog barked as they passed an alleyway, but no other sound disturbed the night except their horses' hooves and the wind whistling across the rooftops. The riders held an even deeper silence, huddled in their cloaks and their own thoughts. The warder led the way, as usual, with Moraine and Egwene close behind. Nynaeve kept near the girl, the others brought up the rear in a tight cluster. Lan kept the horses moving at a brisk walk. Rand watched the streets around them warily, and he noticed his friends doing the same. Shifting moon shadows recalled the shadows at the end of the hall, the way they had seemed to reach out to the Fade. An occasional noise in the distance, like a barrel toppling or a dog barking, jerked every head around. Slowly, bit by bit, as they made their way through the town, they all bunched their horses closer to Lan's black stallion and Moraine's white mare. At the Caemlyn gate, Lan dismounted and hammered with his fist on the door of a small square stone building squatting against the wall. A weary watchman appeared, rubbing sleepily at his face. As Lan spoke, his sleepiness vanished, and he stared past the warder to the others. You want to leave? He exclaimed. Now? In a night? You must be mad. Unless there is some order from the governor that prohibits our leaving, Moraine said. She had dismounted as well, but she stayed back from the door, out of the light that spilled into the dark street. Not exactly, mistress. The watchman peered at her, frowning as he tried to make out her face. But the gates stayed shut from sundown to sunup. No one to come in except in daylight. That's the order. Anyway, there are wolves out there. Killed a dozen cows in the last week. Could kill a man just as easy. No one to come in, but nothing about leaving, Moraine said, as if that settled the matter. You see? We are not asking you to disobey. Lamb pressed something into the watchman's hand. For your trouble, he murmured. I suppose, the watchman said slowly. He glanced at his hand. Gold glinted before he hastily stuffed it in his pocket. I suppose leaving wasn't mentioned at that. Just a minute. He stuck his head back inside. Arndar, get out here and help me open the gate. There's people want to leave. Don't argue, just do it. Two more of the watch appeared from inside, stopping to stare in sleepy surprise at the party of 8 waiting to leave. Under the first watchman's urgings, they shuffled over to heave at the big wheel that raised the thick bar across the gates, then turned their efforts to cranking the gates open. The crank and ratchet made a rapid clicking sound, but the well-oiled gates swung outward silently. Before they were even a quarter open, though, a cold voice spoke out of the darkness. What is this? Are these gates not ordered closed until sunrise? 5 white-cloaked men walked into the light from the guardhouse door. Their cowls were drawn up to hide their faces, but each man rested his hand on his sword, and the golden suns on their left breasts were a plain announcement of who they were. Matt muttered under his breath. The watchmen stopped their cranking and exchanged uneasy looks. This is none of your affair, the first watchman said belligerently. 5 white hoods turned to regard him, and he finished in a weaker tone. The children hold no sway here. The governor? The children of the light, the white-cloaked man who had first spoken said softly, hold sway wherever men walk in the light. Only where the shadow of the Dark One reigns are the children denied. Yes? He swung his hood from the watchman to Lan, then suddenly gave the warder a second, more wary look. The warder had not moved. In fact, he seemed completely at ease. But not many people could look at the children so uncaringly. Lan's stony face could as well have been looking at a boot black. When the white cloak spoke again, he sounded suspicious. What kind of people want to leave town walls in the night during times like these? With wolves stalking the darkness and the Dark One's handiwork seen flying over the town. He eyed the braided leather band that crossed Lan's forehead and held his long hair back. A northerner, yes? Rand hunched lower in his saddle. A Drakkar. It had to be that, unless the man just named anything he did not understand as the Dark One's handiwork. With a fade at the Stag and Lion, he should have expected a Drakkar, but at the moment, he was hardly thinking about it. He thought he recognized the White Cloak's voice. Travelers, Lan replied calmly, of no interest to you or yours. Everyone is of interest to the children of the light. Lan shook his head slightly. Are you really after more trouble with the governor? He has limited your numbers in town, even had you followed. What will he do when he discovers you harassing honest citizens at his gates? He turned to the watchman. Why have you stopped? They hesitated, put their hands back on the crank, then hesitated again when the White Cloak spoke. The governor does not know what happens under his nose. There is evil he does not see or smell, but the children of the light see. The watchmen looked at one another, their hands opened and closed as if regretting the spirit inside the guardhouse. The children of the light smell the evil. The White Cloak's eyes turned to the people on horseback. We smell it and root it out, wherever it is found. Rand tried to make himself even smaller, but the movement drew the man's attention. What have we here? Someone who does not wish to be seen? What do you... Ah. The man brushed back the hood of his white cloak, and Rand was looking at the face he had known would be there. Bornhold nodded with obvious satisfaction. Clearly, Watchman, I have saved you from a great disaster. These are dark friends you were about to help escape from the light. You should be reported to your governor for discipline, or perhaps given to the questioners to discover your true intent this night. He paused, eyeing the Watchman's fear. It seemed to have no effect on him. You would not wish that, no? Instead, I will take these ruffians to our camp, that they may be questioned in the light. Instead of you, yes. You will take me to your camp, White Cloak. Moraine's voice came suddenly from every direction at once. She had moved back into the night at the children's approach, and shadows clumped around her. You will question me. Darkness wreathed her as she took a step forward. It made her seem taller. You will bar my way? Another step, and Rand gasped. She was taller, her head level with his, where he sat on the gray's back. Shadows clung about her face like thunderclouds. Aes Sedai! Bornhold shouted, and 5 swords flashed from their sheaths. Die! The other 4 hesitated, but he slashed her in the same motion and cleared his sword. Rand cried out as Moraine's staff rose to intercept the blade. That delicately carved wood could not possibly stop hard-swung steel. Sword met staff, and sparks sprayed in a fountain, a hissing roar hurling Bornhold back into his white-cloaked companions. All 5 went down in a heap. Tendrils of smoke rose from Bornhold's sword on the ground beside him, blade bent at a right angle, where it had melted almost in 2. You dare attack me? Moraine's voice roared like a whirlwind.
Oh yeah, Chips.
Shadows spun in on her, draped
Thanks
her
for
like a
stopping
hooded
by.
cloak. She loomed as high as the town wall. Her eyes glared down, a giant staring at insects. Go, Lan shouted.
I'm live.
Like
Gotta
he snatched the reins of
go
Moraine's
live
chair,
a little bit
leaped
before I
into
go
his
to
own
bed.
saddle.
Smoke a couple bowls.
He commanded. His shoulders brushed either
Definitely
gate as
appreciate
his
you
stallion
stopping
tortured
by.
the narrow opening like a flung stone. For a moment, Rand remained frozen, staring. Moraine's head and shoulders stood above the wall now. Watchmen and children alike cowered away from her, huddling with their backs against the front of the guardhouse. The Aes Sedai's face was lost in the night, but her eyes, as big as full moons, shone with impatience as well as anger when they touched him. Swallowing hard, he booted Cloud in the ribs and galloped after the others.
Oh, we're not doing
50
too
paces
bad.
from the wall, Lan drew them up. Rand looked back. Moraine's shadowed shape towered
Could be
high
better,
above
but
palisade,
I ain't
and
got
her
no
shoulders in
complaints.
deeper darkness against the night sky.
How you been doing,
Surrounded by a
Chips?
silver nimbus from the hidden moon. As he watched, mouth hanging open, the Aes Sedai stepped over the wall. The gates began swinging shut frantically. As soon as her feet were on the ground outside, she was suddenly her normal size again. Hold the gates! An unsteady voice shouted inside the door. Rand thought it was Morgan. Escape them! Slow the pace closer. The gates slammed shut, and moments later the bar crashed into place, sealing them. Maybe some of those other white folks aren't as eager to confront an Aes Sedai as Bornhold. Moraine stroking the before she tucked her staff under the girth strap. No need to look this time to know there was not even a nick in the staff.
Right.
Taller than a giant, Egwene said breathlessly, shifting on Bella's back. No one else spoke, though Matt and Perrin edged their horses away from the Aes Sedai. Was I? Moraine said absently, as she swung into her saddle. I saw you.
Then my brother's got to end up getting
The mind plays tricks in the night. The eyes
a new vehicle or a new motor because his
This is no time for games.
yeah, he has something wrong with his motor to where
Cut her off.
yeah, he got to rebuild it.
What we gained at the Stag and Lion, we may have lost here. She looked back at the gate and shook her head. If only I could believe the drunk.
But that's gonna cost us.
With the cells
That's gonna cost a lot of money that neither one of us has
Or if only the Murdral was truly blind.
because we're both on
Wishing, I might as well wish for the truly impossible.
fixed income.
No matter.
So we only
They
get
know
so
the
much a
way we must
month,
go,
and
but with luck, we will stay a step
the only
ahead.
work we could get is
Sam?
jobs that
The
pay under
warder
the
moved off
table, and
eastward down the Camden
there ain't no
Road,
jobs like that
and the rest
anymore.
followed close behind.
At least right now that we can
Cutting
find.
rhythmically in the hard-packed earth. They kept to an easy pace, a fast walk the horses could maintain for hours without any Aes Sedai help. Before they had been even an hour on their way, though, Matt cried out, pointing back the way they had come. Look there! They all drew rein and stared. Flames lit the night over Bear Lawn, as if someone had built a house-sized bonfire, tinting the undersides of the clouds with red. Sparks whipped into the sky in the wind. I warned him, Moraine said, but he would not take it seriously. Aldeeb danced sideways, an echo of the Aes Sedai's frustration. He would not take it seriously. The inn, Perrin said. That's the Stag and Lion? How can you be sure? How far do you want to stretch coincidence? Tom asked. It could be the governor's house, but it isn't. And it isn't a warehouse or somebody's kitchen stove or your grandmother's haystack. Perhaps the light shines in us a little this night, Lan said, and Egwene rounded on him angrily. How can you say that?
Because we used to,
This inn is burning. People may be hurt.
excuse me,
If they have attacked the inn,
get our extra money from
perhaps our exit from the
when
town
we used to work at the
display
smoke shop we had that we had in town.
Unless that's what the Myrdville
But
wants
that
us to
place, unfortunately,
think. Moraine nodded in the
cut
darkness.
closed their doors down for good.
In
So,
any case, we must press
and
on.
they paid us in
There will
cash.
be little rest for anyone tonight.
But when they did that,
You
that
say
kind
that
of
so easily, Moraine.
put me and my brother in a bind.
What about the people at the inn? People must be hurt, and the innkeeper has lost his livelihood because of you. For all your talk about walking in the light, you're ready to go on without sparing a thought for him. His trouble is because of you. Because of those three, Glenn said angrily. The fire, the injured, the going on, all because of those three. The fact that the price must be paid is proof that it is worth paying. The Dark One wants those boys of yours, and anything he wants this badly, he must be kept from. Or would you rather let the Fade have them?
Man, I can't complain too much. We got a roof over our head.
Help Master Fitch and the people at the inn? Well,
Our dogs got food. We got
he
food.
started to say something, but Moraine waved it away and went on. I can go back by myself and give some help. Not too much of it.
Maybe
That
behind
was
on a lot of
attention to
shit
those
and
I
have
helped.
to a lot of shit on our plate, but
They would not thank me for, especially with the children of the light in the town.
we can do
Never
it.
leave only Lan to protect the rest of you. He is very good, but it will take more than him if a Myrddraal and a fist of Trollocs find you. Of course, we could all return, though I doubt I can get all of us back.
Oh no, ours just ended up closing down because
And that would expose all of you to whomever set that fire, not to mention the White Cloak. Which
the shop took too many hits as far as like glass wise. Cause we had
I would do something.
we did have the vape stuff and all that,
And in all probability,
but we had a lot of
the Dark One is victory,
like glass,
Moraine replied.
water
Remember what
pieces,
he is that he wants.
spoons or hand pieces,
As surely as anyone in Gila
grinders and all that,
thousands by
plus
share
like
of only
papers
eight of us
and
here.
wraps.
I will have gold sent to Master Fitch, enough to rebuild the Stag and Lion. Gold that cannot be traced to Tarvalon, and help for any who were hurt as well. Any more than that will only endanger them. It is far from simple, you see.
Where's the other part of you?
The warder turned his horse and took up the road again. From time to
Uh,
time, Rand looked back. Eventually, all
What do
he
you
could see
mean,
was the glow on the clouds.
skunk water?
And then even that was lost in the darkness. He hoped Min was all right. All was still pitch dark when the warder finally led them off the packed dirt of the road and dismounted. Rand estimated
fishbowl
there were no more than
pieces.
a couple of hours till dawn.
This is the one I'm using right
Still sound.
now. MJ Arsenal.
1 hour, Land warned as everyone except him was wrapping up in their blankets. He would stand guard while they slept. 1 hour, and we must be on our way. Silence.
Oh, the other part. Me, my brother.
After a few
He's in
minutes,
his
Rand
room.
spoke in a whisper that barely reached Rand.
We don't get into it.
What Gav did with that badger. Rand Rand shook his head silently, and Matt hesitated. Finally, he said, I thought we were safe.
Oh no, he's in his room.
Since we crossed the Tar.
We did
There we were,
smoking one earlier today.
I thought we were safe. And then that dream, and it fade.
Yeah, that's usually the two of us, except for at nighttime.
Not until we get to Tar Valon, Rand said. That's what you told us. Will we be safe then? Perrin asked softly, and all three of them looked to the shadowy mound that was the Aes Sedai. Land had melted into the darkness. He could have been anywhere. Rand yawned suddenly. The others twitched nervously at the sound. I think we'd better get some sleep, he said. Staying awake won't answer anything. Perrin spoke quickly. She should have done something. No one answered. Rand squirmed onto his side to avoid a root, tried his back, then rolled off a stone onto his belly and another root. It was not a good campsite they had stopped at, not like the spots the warder had chosen on the way north from the Tara. He fell asleep wondering if the roots digging into his ribs would make him dream, and woke at Land's touch on his shoulder, ribs aching and grateful that if any dreams had come,
Oh
he
no.
would remember them.
That's usually just the living room.
Dawn, but once the blankets were rolled,
But we
and
got
strapped
separate
behind their
rooms.
saddles, Lan had them riding east again. As the sun rose, they made a bleary-eyed breakfast on bread and cheese and water, eating while they rode, huddled in their cloaks against the wind. All except Lan, that is. He ate, but he was not bleary-eyed, and he did not huddle. He had changed back into a shifting cloak and had whipped around him, fluttering through grays and greens, and the only mind he paid was to keep it clear of his sword arm. His face remained without expression, but his eyes searched constantly, as if he expected an ambush any moment. Chapter 18. The Caemlyn Road. The Caemlyn Road was not very different from the North Road through the two rivers. It was considerably wider, of course, and showed the wear of much more use, but it was still hard-packed dirt, lined on either side by trees that would not have been at all out of place in the two rivers, especially since only the evergreens carried a lead. The land itself was different, though, for by midday, the road entered low hills. For 2 days, the road ran through the hills, cut right through them sometimes, if they were wide enough to have made the road go much out of its way, and not so big as to have made digging through too difficult. As the angle of the sun shifted each day, it became apparent that the road, for all it appeared straight to the eye, curved slowly southward as it ran east. Rand had daydreamed over Master Alvir's old map. Half the boys in Emmons Field had daydreamed over it. And as he remembered, the road curved around something called the Hills of Abshur, until it reached Whitebridge. From time to time, Lan had them dismount atop one of the hills, where he could get a good view of the road, both ahead and behind, and the surrounding
Hell yeah,
countryside
Chip.
as well.
Definitely appreciate
The
it.
warder would study
You have
the
a
view
good
while
one.
the others stretched their legs or sat under the trees and ate. I used to like cheese, Egwene said on the third day after leaving Baerlon. She sat with her back to the bole of a tree, grimacing over a dinner that was once again the same as breakfast, as supper would be. Not a chance of tea. Nice hot tea. She pulled her cloak tighter and shifted around the tree in a vain effort to avoid the swirling wind. Flatwort tea and andalay.
I'll probably have to be Chong because I have glasses that have a vest with patches on it.
Dim the burn in tired muscles. I am sure they do, the Aes Sedai murmured, giving Nynaeve a sidelong glance. Nynaeve's jaw tightened, but she continued in the same tone. Now, if you must go without sleep. No tea, Lan said sharply to Egwene. No fire. We can't see them yet, but they are back there.
I'm listening to
a fade or two.
one of my books I have on
They know we are taking this
my
road.
audio books. It's
No need to tell them exactly
Eye
where
of
we
the
are.
World by Robert Jordan.
Egwene muttered into her cloak. Just regretting. If they know we're on the road.
It's the same one I had on
why don't we
yesterday.
go straight
It's still the
across
same
White
book.
Bridge?
I pretty much started it from where it left off yesterday.
Especially not through the hills of Abshur. The wisdom gave an exasperated sigh. Rand wondered what she was up to. After ignoring the Aes Sedai completely for the first day, Nynaeve had spent the last two trying to talk to her about herbs. Moraine moved away from the wisdom as she went on. Why do you think the road curves to avoid them? And we would have to come back to this road eventually, and we might find them ahead of us instead of following. Rand looked doubtful, and Matt muttered something about the long way round. Have you seen a farm this morning? Lan asked. Or even the smoke from a chimney? You haven't, because it's all wilderness from Bear Lawn to White Bridge. White Bridge is where we must cross the Aranal. That is the only bridge spanning the channel south of Maradan in Saldaia. Tom snorted and blew out his mustaches. What is to stop them from having something, at White Bridge already? From the west came the keening wail of a horn. Lan's head whipped around to stare back down the road behind them. Rand felt a chill. A part of him remained calm enough to think, 10 miles, no more. Nothing stops them, Gleeman, the warder said. We trust to the light and luck. But now we know for certain there are Trollocs behind us. Moraine dusted her hands. It is time for us to move on. The Aes Sedai mounted her white mare. They set off a scramble for the horses, speeded by a second winding of the horn. This time others answered, the thin sounds floating out of the west like a dirge. Rand made ready to put Cloud to a gallop right away, and everyone else settled their reins with the same urgency. Everyone except Lan and Moraine. The warder and the Aes Sedai exchanged a long look. Keep them moving, Moraine Sedai, Lan said finally. I will return as soon as I am able. You will know if I fail. Putting a hand on Mondard's saddle, he vaulted to the back of the Black Stallion and galloped down the hill, heading west. The horns sounded again. Last Lord of the Seven Towers, Moraine said almost too softly for Rand to hear. Drawing a deep breath, she turned Aldeeb to the east. We must go on, she said, and started off at a slow, steady trot. The others followed her in a tight file. Rand twisted once in his saddle to look for Lan, but the warder was already lost to sight among the low hills and leafless trees. Last Lord of the Seven Towers, she had called it. He wondered what that meant. He had not thought anyone besides himself had heard, but Tom was chewing the ends of his mustaches. He had a speculative frown on his face. The Gleeman seemed to know a great many things. The horns called and answered once more behind them. Rand shifted in his saddle. They were closer this time, he was sure of it. 8 miles, maybe 7. Matt and Egwene looked over their shoulders, and Perrin hunched as if he expected something to hit him in the back. Nynaeve rode up to speak to Moraine. Can't we go any faster? She asked. Those horns are getting closer. The Aes Sedai shook her head. And why do they let us know they're there? Perhaps so we will hurry on without thinking of what might be ahead. They kept on at the same steady pace. At intervals, the horns gave cry behind them, and each time the sound was closer. Rand tried to stop thinking of how close, but the thought came unbidden at every brazen wail. 5 miles, he was thinking anxiously, when Lan suddenly burst around the hill behind them at a gallop. He came abreast of Moraine, reining in the stallion. At least 3 fists of Trollocs, each led by a halfman. Maybe 5. If you were close enough to see them, Egwene said worriedly, they could have seen. They could be right on your heels. He was not seen. Nynaeve drew herself up as everyone looked at her. I have followed his trail, remember? Hush, Moraine commanded. Lan is telling us there are perhaps 500 Trollocs behind us. A stunned silence followed, then Lan spoke again. And they are closing the gap. They will be on us in an hour or less. Half to herself, the Aes Sedai said, if they had that many before, why were they not used at Emond's Field? If they did not, how did they come here since? They are spread out to drive us before them, Lan said, with scouts quartering ahead of the main parties. Driving us toward what? Moraine mused. As if to answer her, a horn sounded in the distance to the west. A low moan that was answered this time by others, all ahead of them. Moraine stopped Aldeeb. The others followed her lead, Tom and the Emond's Field folk looking around fearfully. Horns cried out before them and behind. Rand thought they held a note of triumph. What do we do now? Nynaeve demanded angrily. Where do we go? All that is left is north or south, Moraine said. more thinking aloud than answering the wisdom. To the south are the hills of Opshire, bare and dead, and the torrent with no way to cross, no by boat. To the north we can reach the Arnell before nightfall. There will be a chance of a trader's boat, if the ice is broken at Moradon. There is a place the Trollocs will not go, Lan said, but Moraine's head whipped around sharply. No. She motioned to the warder, and he put his head close to hers so their talk could not be overheard. The horns winded, and Rand's horse danced nervously. They're trying to frighten us, Tom cried, attempting to steady his mount. He sounded half angry, half as if the Trollocs were succeeding. They're trying to scare us until we panic and run. They'll have us then. Egwene's head swung with every blast of a horn, staring first ahead of them, then behind, as if looking for the first Trollocs. Rand wanted to do the same thing, but he tried to hide it. He moved Cloud closer to her. We go north, Moraine announced. The horns keened shrilly as they left the road and trotted into the surrounding hills. The hills were low, but the way was all up and down, with never a flat stretch, beneath bare-branched trees and through dead undergrowth. The horses climbed laboriously up one slope, only to canter down the other. Lan set a hard pace, faster than they had used in the road. Branches lashed Rand across the face and chest. Old creepers and vines caught his arms, and sometimes snagged his foot right out of the stirrup. The keening horns came ever closer, and ever more frequently. As hard as Lan pushed them, they were not getting farther on very quickly. They traveled 2 feet up or down for every one forward, and every foot was a scrambling effort. And the horns were coming nearer. 2 miles, he thought, maybe less. After a time, Lan began peering first one way, then another, the hard planes of his face as close to worry as Rand had seen them. Once the warder stood in his stirrups to stare back the way they had come. All Rand could see were trees. Lan settled back into his saddle and unconsciously pushed back his cloak to clear his sword as he resumed searching the forest. Rand met Matt's eyes questioningly, but Matt only grimaced at the warder's back and shrugged helplessly. Lan spoke then over his shoulder. There are Trollocs nearby. They topped the hill and started down the other side. Some of the scouts sent ahead of the rest, probably. If we come on them, stay with me at all costs, and do as I do. We must keep on the way we are going. Blood and ashes, Tom muttered, and Eve motioned to Egwene to keep close. Scattered stands of evergreens provided the only real cover, but Rand tried to peer in every direction at once, his imagination turning gray tree trunks caught out of the corner of his eye into Trollocs. The horns were closer, too, and directly behind them. He was sure of it. Behind and coming closer. They topped another hill. Below them, just starting up the slope, marched Trollocs carrying poles tipped with great loops of rope or long hooks. Many Trollocs. The line stretched far to either side, the ends out of sight. But at its center, directly in front of Lan, a fade road. The Myrddraal seemed to hesitate as the humans appeared atop the hill, but in the next instant it produced a sword with the black blade Rand remembered so queasily, and waved it over its head. The line of Trollocs scrambled forward. Even before the Myrddraal moved, Lan's sword was in his hand. "Stay with me," he cried, and Mondar plunged down the slope toward the Trollocs. "For the 7 towers!" he shouted. Rand gulped and booted the Grey forward. The whole group of them streamed after the warder. He was surprised to find Tam's sword in his fist. Caught up by Lan's cry, he found his own. "Manethering! Manethering!" Perrin took it up. "Manethering! Manethering!" But Matt shouted, "Karayan Kaldazar!"
Hey, Running Bear, how you doing?
Al-Alasanda! The Fate's head turned from the Trollocs to the riders charging toward him. The black sword froze over
Hope
its
your
head.
night's going
The
good,
upper of
Running
its
Bear.
cowl swiveled, searching among the oncoming horsemen. Then Lan was on the Myrddraal as the human folk fell on the Trolloc line. Warder's blade met black steel from the forges of Thakandar with a clang like a great bell, the toll echoing in the hollow, a flash of blue light filling the air like sheet lightning. Beast-muzzled, almost men swarmed around each of the humans. Catch hold of
Get why you're since you showed up.
Only Lan and the Myrddraal did they avoid. Those two fought in a clear circle, black horses matching step for step, swords matching stroke for stroke. The air flashed and peeled. Cloud rolled his eyes and screamed, rearing and lashing out with his hooves at the snarling, sharp-toothed faces surrounding him. Heavy bodies crowded shoulder to shoulder around him. Digging his heels in ruthlessly, Lan forced the gray on, swinging his sword with little of the skill Lan had tried to impart, hacking as if hewing wood. Egwene. Desperately, he searched for her as he kicked the gray onward, slashing a path through the hairy bodies as though chopping. Moraine's white
smoke,
dashed and cut at the slightest touch of the Aes Sedai's hands on the reins. Her face was as hard as Lan's as her staff lashed out. Flame enveloped Trollocs, then burst with a roar that left its misshapen forms unmoving.
That was a cash hit.
Nynaeve
That
and
was a
Egwene
nasty
rode close
one.
to the Aes Sedai with frantic urgency. Belt knives in
Nightcap,
hand.
hell yeah.
Their short blades would be no use at all if a Trolloc came close. Bran tried to turn Cloud toward them, but the gray had the bit in his teeth. Screaming and kicking, Cloud struggled forward, however hard Bran tugged at the reins. Around the three women, a space opened as Trollocs tried to flee from Moraine's staff, but as they attempted to avoid her, she sought them out. Fires roared and the Trollocs howled in rage and fury. Above the roar and howl crashed the tolling of the warder's sword against the Myrddraals. The air flared blue around them, flared again. A noose on the end of a pole swept at Bran's head. With an awkward slash, he cut the catchpole in two, then hacked the goat-faced Trolloc that held it. A hook caught his shoulder from behind and tangled in his cloak, jerking him backwards. Frantically, almost losing his sword, he clutched the pommel of his saddle to keep his seat. Cloud twisted, shrieking. Rand hung on to saddle and reins desperately. He could feel himself slipping, inch by inch, falling to the
Don't
hook.
you may go to town for
Cloud
one?
swung around. For an instant, Rand saw Perrin, half out of his saddle, struggling to wrest his axe away from three Trollocs. They had him by one arm and both legs. Cloud
Yeah,
plunged.
that would get you one quicker than having to order one. Then you
Trolloc dashed in
can,
and seized
that's what I
Rand's
like
leg,
about
forcing his foot free of the
going
stirrup.
to a shop versus online. Online is good. You can't find it cheaper, but you never know the quality of the glass until you get it.
Cloud reared and shrieked.
At a shop, you can actually see the quality of the glass and make sure it's a good, durable one or one that you're gonna like.
All of the Trollocs screamed, a howl like all the dogs in the world gone mad. Around the humans, Trollocs fell writhing to the ground, tearing at their hair, clawing their own faces. All of the Trollocs, biting at the ground, snapping at nothing, howling. Then Rand saw the Myrddraal. Still upright in the saddle of its madly dancing horse, black sword still flailing, it had no head. "It won't die until nightfall," Tom had to shout between heavy breaths over the unrelenting screams. "Not completely. That is what I've heard, anyway." "Ride!" Lan shouted angrily. The warder had already gathered Moraine and the other two women and had them halfway up the next hill. "This is not all of them." Indeed, the horns dirged again, above the shrieks of the Trollocs on the ground, to east and west and south. For a wonder, Mat was the only one who had been unhorsed. Rand trotted toward him, but Mat tossed a noose away from him with a shudder, gathered his bow, and scrambled into his saddle unaided, though rubbing at his throat.
Oh
The
shit,
horns
1
billowed
hour
like hounds
drive.
with the scent of a deer.
Not bad.
Hounds closing in. If Lan had set a hard pace before, he doubled it now, till the horses scrabbled uphill faster than they had gone down before, then nearly threw themselves at the other side. But still the horns came nearer, until the guttural shouts of pursuit were heard whenever the horns paused, until eventually the humans reached a hilltop just as Trollocs appeared on the next hill behind them. The hilltop blackened with Trollocs, snouted, distorted faces howling, and three Myrddraal overawed them all. Only 100 spans separated the two parties. Rand's heart shriveled like an old grate. 3. The Myrddraal's black swords rose as one. Trollocs boiled down the slope, thick, triumphant cries rising, catchpoles bobbing above as they ran. Moraine climbed down from Aldib's back. Tom made to remove something from her pouch, unwrapped it. Rand glimpsed dark ivory. The Ungrial. With Ungrial in one hand and staff in the other, the Aes Sedai set her feet facing the onrushing Trollocs and the Fade's black swords, raised her staff high, and stabbed it down into the earth. The ground rang like an iron kettle struck by a mallet. The hollow clang dwindled, faded away. For an instant then, it was silent. Everything was silent. The wind died. The Trolloc cries stilled. Even their charge forward slowed and stopped. For a heartbeat, everything waited. Slowly the dull ringing returned, changing to a low rumble, growing until the earth moaned. The ground trembled beneath Cloud's hooves. This was Aes Sedai work like the stories told about. Rand wished he were 100 miles away. The tremble became a shaking that set the trees around them quivering. The gray stumbled and nearly fell. Even Mondar and riderless Aldeeb staggered as if drunk, and those who rode had to cling to reins and manes, to anything, to keep their seats. The Aes Sedai still stood as she had begun, holding the Angreal and her upright staff thrust into the hilltop. And neither she nor the staff moved an inch, for all that the ground shook and shivered around her. Now the ground rippled, springing out from in front of her staff, lapping toward the Trollocs like ripples on a pond, ripples that grew as they ran, toppling old bushes, flinging dead leaves into the air, growing, becoming waves of earth, rolling toward the Trollocs. Trees in the hollow lashed like switches in the hands of small boys. On the far slope, Trollocs fell in heaps, tumbled over and over by the raging earth. Yet, as if the ground were not rearing all around them, the Myrddraal moved forward in a line, their dead black horses never missing a step, every hoof in unison. Trollocs rolled on the ground all about the black steeds, howling and grabbing at the hillside that heaved them up. The Myrddraal came slowly on. Moraine lifted her staff, and the earth stilled. But she was not done. She pointed to the hollow between the hills, and flame gouted from the ground, a fountain 20 feet high. She flung her arms wide, and the fire raced to left and right as far as the eye could see, spreading into a wall separating humans and Trollocs. The heat made Rand
Alright, I'm probably gonna
even on the hilltop. The Myrddraal's
call it into this life right now.
They had screamed at the fire.
Try to lay down, get some sleep. I want to thank everyone for stopping by and chilling with me for a little bit. Hope everyone has a good night and stay safe out there. Till next time, everyone.
From his horse to catch her. Go on, he told the